Pale, male and stale, not me. I've got who for you and I don't say anything blue. Toby Hadoke here, trying to accentuate the positive by watching a Doctor Who story and trying to guess my special guest's favourite things about it.
Hello, Toby. My name is James Goss, and I write things for Big Finish. I write target novels, and, well, that's what I do. And you've asked me to nominate a story, and I'm nominating For to Doomsday because nobody else will, because they're all wrong. Because For to Doomsday is For to Doomsday. And I hope you're about to enjoy For to Doomsday as much as it's given me pleasure over many, many years since I first saw it.
Well, welcome everybody. I thoroughly enjoyed, in a strange kind of way, episode 1 of For to Doomsday, or Inside the Spaceship, which is where we spent that first instalment. And we left on a very strange cliffhanger. I'm in the company of James Goss. He chose the corridors. I chose the lighting, but I like the lighting of the corridors. Certainly the design is getting a thumbs up from James and I. Let's see what we will enjoy about episode 2 I'm watching on BritBox, even though I also have it on DVD and on Blu-ray. So what is going to happen to all this stuff when I die? So people are going, why has he got it? What? Anyway, but I think we all have that in common, don't we? So, I also have signed photos of some of the let's not get into that. Watch from the... We're strange people, aren't we? We don't. We're not as strange as anybody else, actually. Well, I just think we allow our strangeness a full flourish. I think other people try and keep a lid on their strangeness, and it makes them furious. Whereas, actually, I think if you embrace it and just... I'm aware that what I do is nonsense, but life is kind of nonsense, and if you don't give full rein to your, and I'm not saying aren't I wacky, because I hate those people too. I'm just going there's nothing. We all have characteristics that are probably you can trace back to the animal within us. And this is, based on, we catalogue things and keep them in order and obsess over them because they're the things that make you feel safe. And if you feel safe, you are less on edge. And if you're less on edge and feel that your nest is surrounded by the things that you enjoy and that make you comfortable and stimulate you, you better function in life. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it as I watch a piece of television from the early 1980s that I've seen many, many times before when I haven't read all of James Joyce's Ulysses or learnt to make pasta. But there we go. That's the journey I'm taking through life. And this is going to be a journey on a very slow spaceship. So we're going to watch from the beginning of episode 2 as I press whatever it is I press in 3, 2, 1. And watch from the beginning. So it's going to start with I know some people hate this theme. I actually rather like it. I'm not wild about Davison's face. I've said this before. I think Davison's face is not great for the title sequence. That pleasant open face, and it opens like a Venetian blind. I wasn't wild about the neon logo, but I quite like it now. I still don't think any of it's a patch on the earlier stuff, but maybe it has nostalgia for me. I don't know. Yes, because some of you listening to this, I suppose, this will be an old story for you, whereas for me, as I said last time, it's a modern one. It's a new Doctor. I watched this story unfold. And then I'm reading the credits, you go, a lot of those people are dead now. Well, of course they are, because when I watched this, I was 6 or 7, and I'm at least 40 years older than that. 40 years! So hang on, this is as old as now as the war was when I was watching this. That's how far away it was. It's very. I think it's quite artful to. Well, no, it's quite appropriate to have the two of them dressed in green. They are the frog-like creatures. So, it's a bit on the nose, but it works. And for the younger members of the audience, it is an echo of those creatures that we saw them as first. I wish we'd had a better look at the close-up of their masks. Maybe he didn't do a close-up of the masks because they didn't spend a lot of time working on them because they were only going to be used for a very short amount of time. Paul Shelley is a marvellous, marvellous actor and quite big news at the time. I remember he was in Secret Army. He was in a few things on the telly, but he'd also had come or was about to come to the Ludlow Festival. I live Minister of Enlightenment. He's got a very nice, sharp features and a pointed voice, which makes him excellent for heroism, also for authority, but also for sort of arch villainy. He's a well sculpted actor, I think, tonally and visually, facially. He's got a great pointed face, and has had a fine career. I mean, he was playing lead roles at the Globe Theatre in relatively recent history. Brother of the actor Francis Matthews. He was somebody that I'd approached for Who's Round via a friend. Somebody just emailed me and said, I sort of know Paul Shelley. Shall I ask? And I went, oh yeah, great. And got a message back saying, no, it's not really his thing. And then Lisa Bowerman asked him not that long after, and he was really enthusiastic, and he missed his train, and he went to the trouble of looking up my agent and ringing my agent and saying, I don't have his number, can you call him and say, I'm sorry that I'm late, and blah, blah, blah. And I bought many people a meal for doing Who's Round, and he would only accept a chocolate muffin, and was game and enthusiastic, and made the journey in. He doesn't live in London. So having had a no from one advance, got a yes from another. Look at the depth of that set. They're going out into the lighting. Very, very good design. So I'm very fond of Paul Shelley, and I know he's not embraced sort of fan events or anything with any greater enthusiasm, because I know he's been approached and it's been very polite. It's just not his thing. So I still don't quite know why. And I'm not saying it's anything about me, because I have equally had people who have said no to me, and I've gone, oh, well, obviously it's not their thing, who've then said yes to loads of other people. So I think there's a few of us who've sort of tried to trace and track down sort of support players or people a bit further down the cast list, or, not to complete all of that, the sort of jigsaw puzzle of Doctor Who. And sometimes being very professional and saying your BBC credentials really helps. And I remember trying desperately I tried so many different approaches for Norman Jones, who was Major Baker in the Silurians, and Chris Song in the Abominable Snowman, Hieronymus in the Mask of Mandragora. And I thought, well, the final what I'll do is I'll wear all my official, I'll put all my CV stuff, because I'll come across as a real professional, and either got nothing or no, he's not interested. But then I discovered later a friend of mine who'd written as a sort of enthusiastic, just an enthusiastic sort of non-media type, as it were, and got a lovely reply. So, and I discovered later about Norman that he was slightly disappointed by the end of his career and thought he'd been let down by the industry. So me coming across as, oh, well, I'm professional, I'm from the industry, was actually totally the wrong approach. So that's just an example of that I'll probably use when I do the commentaries for Abominable Snowman, Doctor and the Silurians, and Mask of Mandragora. So it has no place here. But just I didn't want to seem boastful about saying, I got Paul Shelley and he doesn't do other stuff, because I've equally had people who've not spoken to me, have spoken to loads of other people. So... and thank God for the likes of Ben Jolly and Lee Allam and Stephen Griffiths, who are and Alex Moore, who are other people who like to track people down. I love that effect with the monopticon and the hat dangling off it. Obviously, that's on a bit of string, but it's still moving. And it's not moving like it's wobbling. That's a great shot. And of course, called they're bankons, and I like the sort of bank of panels behind them. There's a real sense of scale there. Doctor Who is often feels like it's quite confined, and that can work to its advantage. And having small pokey sets in atmospheric stories can really work. But this, I think, has a great, excuse the pun, majesty about it, a real sense of this, because you need a sense of scale because of the sheer length of the journeys back and forth that this is taking. Soul is a blasphemy. I like that idea. Flesh time. And the whole thing, I like, having not liked some of the writing of the humour in particular, I do think things like the flesh time is a lovely evocative sort of phrase, and it means they're setting us up for a sort of different mindset. That's the interesting thing about these villains, is that they conduct their whole way of life in a totally different way, and I find that very interesting. Davison's already, I mean, he's landed fully formed, hasn't he? He even puts his hands in his pockets well. Excuse me for repeating myself, but I know not everybody listens to all of these. I was not a fan of Davison as a youth because he was not Tom Baker. And he wasn't one of the other Doctors that I hadn't really seen much of, but because they were on before I was born, they were brilliant. I love Davison now. I think he's probably the most consistent actor of the lot. I don't think he's... I think he judges his performance really well, and I think he rises beyond the limitations of what could be seen as the downfalls of the casting, i.e. that he's young and sort of fresh-faced, and I think he conveys intelligence, he conveys eccentricity, and he conveys, and I love that sort of desperate, that the fact that his voice goes to quite a high register means that he can do panic and he can do tetchiness, but crucially he suggests an older person in a younger person's body without sort of doing crusty, fusty acting. It's a great performance, and it's a character actor's performance in the body of a leading man. And credit to John Nathan Turner, because he, following Tom Baker is really hard, of course, really hard. Baker was, the definitive Doctor at the time, and that lasted for so long. He was everybody's, idea of Doctor Who. People still fondly remembered the old ones, but Tom Baker was such a success, certainly in my sphere of reference anyway. There was the odd bus driver who went, oh, I like that John Pertwee the best. And yes, of course, the thing, your first Doctor is your favourite Doctor, but I think, Tom Baker made such an indelible mark on the show. Following him was hard, and I would argue harder than the job that I suppose Troughton had a hard job. Anyway, it was hard, and I think it was that's a nicely composed shot as well. And I think John Nathan Turner casting a star, all creatures great and small. Davison was such a well-known face, and casting from sort of left field, not trying to match Tom Baker, but going a completely different direction, was a canny piece of producership, and I think the viewing figures showed that, and Davison's performance showed that, and I think that was one of. It showed, it showed how strong Nathan Turner could be, whereas we know in other areas his judgment wasn't always on point. But I think there was a time when he couldn't put a foot right in the eyes of fans, myself included. I liked being an angry fan at that time, and actually that's it's his the balance of his successes and failures, I think, is more even than I think we sometimes, think when our thoughts of that time automatically kick in. Summon Bacon. He's great. He's good. I love the way he leans forward. I don't know why, because it's just sort of punctuating the sort of stiff kingliness thing, but it has a power to it. There's a lot of this, isn't there, of different extras representing different time periods doing dances, which is it's a thing. Somebody should have told those two wrestling extras to fold their arms in the same way, because they've decided to do them in different ways. I don't know. And that's now, I think that shot of Shelley there is taken from quite far away and zoomed in, and it just gives it a slightly different quality to if they'd had the camera up closer. And it sort of, again, it just helps to suggest people looking over each other, and the crowdedness and the distance between, and yeah. But as I say, as a recreation, yeah. Now, as I say, I think the whole thing about the different cultures is a really great concept, and I think you could do so much with it today that they don't do here. It's almost as if it's enough to say we have, actors in different costumes, actors of obviously different ethnicity. Now, Philip Locke here, I remember his obit in, was it The Guardian, which was written by a friend, so it wasn't as objective as obits have to. They've changed their house star slightly. It might have been The Independent, but the same applies really. But it described him as playing a balmy android in Doctor Who. And I just like the use of the word balmy, and I don't think he's so good at this sort of dialogue. So good at this sort of dialogue. Look at that set. Look at that lighting. Beautiful. And that Monopticon. This is all great, if ponderous. Music's good too. Very bright. Yeah, and so we've got. And I suppose this is quite 60s. I don't think Terence Dudley's ever watched Doctor Who before, do you? Or if he did, it was in about 1964. I think he watched The Censorites. He watched The Censorites, directed Meglos, and then did this, and this was the result. But he was an odd child, and I know, because I know Peter Davison is not a fan of Terence Dudley's scripts either, and didn't he? He seems to have had a history of sort of falling out with people who created his, who created series that he produced, because I think he took Survivors into the sort of Good Life direction, didn't he? Which is not what Terry Nation had envisaged, and I don't think Pedler and Davis were wild about what he did with Doomwatch. So my impression is he seems to have spent a lot of his time pissing people off. I think he died on Christmas Day, so he even ruined Christmas. Oh, that's a terrible thing to say. But I would be interested. I don't know anyone that ever met him. I'd be interested in finding out a bit, because he was one of those, because he was much more of a sort of name before he came to Doctor Who almost. This is like the sort of back end of his career, really. So when you think about Terence Dudley, you really sort of think about those producerships he had of those great series in the 70s, and this sort of weird Doctor Who flavoured coda that took him to retirement. But I'd be interested to, I don't know, because I've got sort of little nuggets about him, I'd be interested to get the full story, I think. So yes, I can imagine. I can't. Would he have had to have submitted a storyline? Episode 2: Doctor Who watches lots of dances and waves at one of the baddies, whilst wondering what's going on. They have lungs. Let them remember that. I think that's very nice, and that sort of emphasises, Monarch's whole ambivalence towards the organic. He wouldn't find many shops to his liking here in Chorlton, South Manchester, where you can't move for hummus and organic kale. And I always like Doctor Who when it contrasts, when it juxtaposes, when it so we've got somebody here who looks like a picture postcard Greek philosopher, and then they've gone for the very stereotypical look, but that's absolutely the right choice because you've got him typing into a keyboard, and I love those chunky keyboards. They're much more. They make a great noise, and there's a lot of them in this period of Doctor Who. And I suppose to somebody that was born after me, they probably look a bit sort of quaint and old-fashioned. But to me, they're great. They're sort of chunky, and I like the way they augment consoles in 80s Who. It's all, I guess, shows it's all about context and when you were born. But seeing a Greek philosopher typing into a Commodore 64 keyboard, I like that. I like what that's Doctor Who to me, colliding different recognizable things and making you look at them afresh and strange, and they look incongruous. And that's what the concept of Doctor Who is. It's a police box on an alien planet. That's the essential of Doctor Who, and a natural development of that is to have a Greek philosopher typing into keyboard. I like the way that Philip Locke does this, where he does that. Oh, I'm pretending I'm talking to you normally and explaining the fight, but I'm actually showing that I want to talk to you. I think he acted that well, and I think it's a nice moment between the characters. It's been one of my favourite bits so far, and it's I suppose it's the sort of the length of time that it takes adds to the tension. It's a funny old fight. The fight sequences in this are a bit odd. And of course, it was a good diversion of the Doctor, because you think, oh, it's a bit hoary that he does a feint. But actually, it of course it distracts persuasion, which it's supposed to do, but also it ties in thematically with the pomposity that Monarch has about his way of being. So he's like, yeah, these fleshy people, these organic people, they faint, which means that it's useful to the plot as well as to the immediate needs of the story, which is to get Bygon out of the way and the Doctor to cause a distraction. I know they're supposed to be letting them sort of wander round, and she does raise the question of saying, is it wise to let them see? But I think your villains these days would just go, let's not let the people do the thing that might get them to find out bits about our plan. But I suppose because Monarch is arrogant, and again I think Johns is very good not to overplay that. He doesn't. I suppose he does have a superior temper. He just pitches it right. It's a well pitched performance. Because there's some funny special effects in this, aren't there? Is there a stabbing now that is a bit weird? And it's but you do actually see the thing go through him. I remember that being awful. It's actually pretty good, isn't it? It's strange because it's done with a special effect, isn't it? To actually see the sword go through. A very stylized fight, though. The fight is B.H. Barry, isn't it? Who also did the fight in... there's a lot of this, isn't there? Well... I don't know. I think there's just something quite comical about yet another dance. We've had them all now. Oh yes, and actually, it's rather good to see, Tegan so appalled by thinking she we get a bit blasé about death in Doctor Who, but this is one quite a nice riposte to that, where somebody's actually pretty disgusted by what she's seen, when actually ironically, isn't it, that we see there's so much real death that people don't bat an eyelid about, but this is a fake death. But again, it's one of those useful things, in a bit like the atmosphere that I was talking about in episode 1. that a series that is so often blasé about it, it's nice to occasionally have a more realistic reaction to death, just so that we take stock and just remind ourselves that, you know, the things that we take in our stride in these shows would be things that would absolutely appall us and give us PTSD within 5 minutes. And this is a great piece of, oh, hang on. So, okay, he's been stabbed, but he's not dead and he's been mended. What is that all about? And I suppose, you know, we can guess because of the references to flesh time and that sort of thing, but we aren't quite sure. And it's letting its developments out, you know, a bit at a time. That was very pre-credit sequence in New Who, wasn't it? Somebody will advance towards us and we'll back away, because somebody's advancing slowly. Whereas if it hadn't been at a dramatic high point, they'd have just grabbed them and pulled them out. So the only organic life is in the floral chamber. He's got an odd diction, but I do like it. He only had one eye, Philip Locke, but we'll get into that in the next. Now, I remember this being a slightly naff effect as well, but actually, it's again that doesn't quite work. I can see what they're going for there, but of course, his face stays where it is when he lifts the mask, whereas of course, the mouth would move up. So. A brave attempt to do an effect there that doesn't quite work, but actually the revealing of the chest is okay, and I adore that. And again, I remember at the time being slightly nonplussed by it because I was 6 and I wanted somebody to point a gun at somebody. But I think the sort of slightly plaintive way that he goes, "This is me," I find charming and weird. But it reveals that now I suppose the revelation that somebody is an android is a bit it's a bit bread and butter for Doctor Who, but the way that it's sort of drawn out in a way, and the way that they build up to it, the only organic life is in the floral chamber, and you know, this is me, rather than I'm an android, this is me, I think is charming and weird and slightly, and that, as I say, that slightly forlorn way that he does it, I think is really rather disarming. So again, I'm sort of speaking against my first experience of this show in saying that I you know, again, I really like that cliffhanger. I suppose because I've got so many Doctor Who cliffhangers that I've seen many times, and a lot of them are fairly similar, and these two aren't. You know, they're peculiar, and I think I'm going to choose the cliffhanger as my favourite thing of episode 2. This is me. Even though I think the bit where he lifts his head is obviously where they've superimposed Philip Locke's face onto the mask, but of course then when the mask lifts, the face stays where it is and of course vanishes, but it doesn't vanish in the way, it doesn't quite work, which adds to the slightly weird disjointedness of this story, which I've always acquainted with. You go, oh yeah, it's quite slow and wondering about a spaceship, but it's quite charming and quite philosophical, and there's nothing bad about it. And then you go, oh no, there are a series of really bad special effects, which, because I'd completely forgotten and gone, there's not that many, because the stabbing was fine and the revealing of the chest was okay, although the circuitry does look like it's sort of been jammed into a cupboard. It doesn't look like the sort of beating android heart of a it's not Blade Runner, is it? It's like a box of spare parts. But I've just remembered there's some very bad special effects still to come. But which I wonder, if it didn't have a couple of sequences that are really, quite poor, I wonder if we would be more charmed by this story. But I suppose we want a bit more excitement from our Doctor Who, do we, than this? But if I want an exciting Doctor Who, I've got plenty on the shelf. So again, it is with the benefit of the fact that I have every episode of Doctor Who in several different formats and can choose one with machine guns whenever I want, that because that I feel that this also has a place in the canon, which, as I say, I'm not sure was my feeling when I watched it as a kid. But I was 6. What did I know? What does James... I wasn't 6. I was 7. Was I 7? 6, 7? Oh, I was 8. 6, 7, 8. I was 8. I still didn't know very much. So, James Goss, what does he think of part 2? And what does he choose as his favourite thing? We had a similar little bit of smattering of crossover with the first one. I'm hoping he's chosen the cliffhanger. I feel that he might have done. I'm feeling, I was going to say quietly confident. I've just said it out loud about this one. James.
The best thing about episode 2 is obviously enlightenment and persuasion, because they are Doctor Who villains literally drawn from a companion's mind, and they are sassy. Even a story as wonderful as 4 to Doomsday does not necessarily deserve enlightenment and persuasion, because they are fabulous. And my favourite moment, even though it isn't necessarily from this episode, is definitely, yes, Doctor, the poor are always with us. These are villains who know they're on a Doctor Who story and are really, really enjoying it. Hooray!
Enlightenment and persuasion are good. They're very 80s as well, aren't they? They look very 80s. Paul Shelley was also, he'd been in Tale of Two Cities as well, hadn't he? Directed by Michael Bryant, playing the lead in that. So, very, very... Oh, or had he been in that, or was he about to be in it? Look it up. I'm not IMDb today. But he was a face of the 80s, and Annie Lambert was also a face of the 80s. So that, this is Doctor Who, was always, oh, it's that person. And I think it just always gave something a sheen of quality of people that you'd seen from other things turned up and lent their heft to silly old Doctor Who. It made you think, oh, Doctor Who's not silly. These are, this is stuff that attracts quality. So yeah, well done for choosing enlightenment and persuasion. Would I have chosen them? I don't know. Maybe I've sort of rather taken them for granted. And they look great. I love his velvet jacket. And she's stunningly beautiful. Anyway, James chose enlightenment and persuasion. I chose the cliffhanger. Well, that was him. And this is me. Ta-ta. Well, thanks ever so much for listening to Happy Times and Places, which is presented by me, Toby Hadoke. And my special guest this time around is James Goss, who can be found on Twitter @GossJam. And his wonderful Doctor Who books are available at all the outlets you'd expect. I'd like to thank him, as well as the patrons who make these podcasts possible, and they include Mark Aldridge, Kit Allen, Sebastian April, Tilt Ariza, Simon Ash, Richard Alt, Stephen Bamford, Lung Baramus Banks, James Bell, Richard Bignell, Peter Blackett, Robin Bland, Kyle Bors, David Brody, Nigel Bromley, Hugh Buchtman, Anthony Carroll, Phil Chapman, Ralph Chilton, Susan Christian, Steve Churchill, Mark Clues, Graham Cluley, Charles Coffin, Simon Coling, Paul Cornaghi, Martin Cook, Matt Corner, and Paul Cornell. The music for these podcasts is by Dave Gates and the artwork by Dylan Patterson. Hey, look, if you fancy being on that list of lovelies, and their contributions really do help, it buys me time to do these, hopefully properly, so that they sound good and aren't slapdash. I mean, any ums and ers are just my natural poor diction. I know, I'm actually a speaker for a living, but I don't half um and Anyway, let's see if there was an tin and an interesting tin, we'd make a fortune for charity. Interesting, my utterance of the word, not me, my being. So don't worry, I'm not under any illusions. I'm not under any illusions. Anyway, what I'm trying to say is, if you want to be on the list of patrons, go to patreon.com/Toby Hadoke, where you can pay to give me an adectomy. That's where I get all my stuttering surgically removed. No, you can contribute once a month for as little as £3 a month. And for that, you get bonus materials, extra releases, You get free podcasts. The patrons get ones where I go and edit all the No, you don't. But you do get various little get little bits and bobs. Various. I've got really self-conscious about the erring now. Is this what I sound like in real life? This is awful. It's a good job I don't have to listen to this. It would make me feel physically sick. Anyway, I hope it's not having that effect on you. Become a patron for as little as £3 a month. And if you sign up for a year, you get a 10% discount on top of even that. And there are all sorts of goodies there. Ask Me Anythings once a month. As I say, 6 months ahead on the happy times and places. And there are bonus and exclusive releases as well. And all of that is available at the lowest tier, the £3, although there are some other little goodies as you ascend the tiers. But yeah, £3 a month, not bad. And I'll tell you what, if the monthly thing is a little bit too daunting, you can go to ko-fi.com/Toby Hadoke, where whenever you're feeling flush, or if I sound particularly hungry, I'm erring on the side of malnutrition, you can just chuck a few pennies my way whenever you like as a one-off, non-binding donation. But look, I know that times are tough, and I'm just very grateful to you for listening to this stuff in the first place. What was that I said about editing? Should I edit that out? No, I'll tell you what, I'll leave that in, because anybody listening now is really, I mean, you should be expecting the dregs. The fun is over, if it even began. But that's the sort of thing I'd normally take out of, a proper intro. And anyway, let's not get into what I do for you. You do it for me by listening. And what you could also do is go to iTunes and Podbean and wherever you get these podcasts from, and give them 5-star reviews, and also some positive write-ups. That would really help, because that just enables me to stand out from the crowd. And if you're in the States and you have friends in America, these do pretty well in the UK. I'm absolutely gobsmacked and chuffed. But the listenership in America, which is a massive place, is comparatively lower. And I'm sure I sound easy on the ear to my American friends, and I've always enjoyed my time in America. So if you're an American Doctor Who fan and you have friends who don't know about this stuff, please do tell them. Thank you very much. You can follow these podcasts on @Hadoke Podcasts on Twitter. I'm on Twitter too, @Toby Hadoke. So I've messed about with the beginning there. You see, part of me thinks the beginning should always be the same. But what I've started to do is I've started to get a little bit blasé about the opening, the introduction, what this podcast is about. But only on the middle episodes. I'm still keeping the first and the last episode, proper and formal. It's a bit like when they credited, the film cameraman and the lighting person on a Doctor Who. They tend to do it on the first and the last episodes only. So I keep the first and the last episodes for the proper way of doing it. But anyone that accompanies us on the whole journey, well, you get a bit of frivolity, you get a bit of breaking of the format. Oh, I'm a maverick. I hope at least one of you cares.